As I drove home one fateful night from my fiancée's house, little did I know that the dark stretch of Florida highway would become the setting for a series of terrifying events that would haunt me for years to come. It was a seemingly normal night, the kind where the darkness envelopes the road, punctuated only by the occasional glow of streetlights and the headlights of passing vehicles. Cruising at around 75 miles per hour, I felt the familiar hum of the engine beneath me as I navigated the familiar route. However, little did I know that this routine journey would soon turn into a nightmare. As I approached a slight hill, my vision obscured by the rise, a sense of unease crept over me. Instinctively, I eased off the accelerator, my senses on high alert. It was then that I reached the peak of the hill, and what lay beyond sent a chill down my spine. In the beam of my headlights, I saw it, a giant construction vehicle, its massive frame looming ominously in the darkness. But what struck me as utterly chilling was the fact that all of its lights were turned off, and it was parked in the left lane of the highway, an unexpected and deadly obstacle in the path of unsuspecting motorists. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the danger I was in. With split-second precision, I veered sharply into the right lane, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as I fought to regain control of the car. The Cherokee I was driving responded with agility, but the close call left me shaken to the core. For a moment, I sat there, adrenaline coursing through my veins, as I processed what had just happened. The image of the construction vehicle, like a dark specter lurking on the highway, burned into my mind. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let another unsuspecting driver fall victim to this deadly trap. Without hesitation, I reached for my phone and dialed the number for the Florida Highway Patrol. My voice trembled as I recounted the chilling encounter, urging them to dispatch officers to the scene before tragedy struck. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on me as I waited for their response, my mind racing with the possibilities of what could have happened if I hadn't been vigilant. As I continued on my journey, my nerves on edge, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that lingered in the air. Each passing mile felt like an eternity, every shadow cast by the trees along the roadside like a sinister omen. The events of that night had shaken me to my core, leaving me acutely aware of the fragility of life and the dangers that lurked in the darkness. But just when I thought the worst was behind me, fate had one more twisted surprise in store. As I rounded a bend in the road, my headlights illuminating the darkness ahead, I spotted a figure lying motionless in the ditch beside the highway. At first I thought it was a deer, but as I drew closer, my blood ran cold. "Deer don't wear boots," my brain whispered, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. With trembling hands I brought the car to a screeching halt, my heart pounding in my chest as I stared at the figure in horror. Without a second thought, I threw the car into reverse, my mind racing with thoughts of what I might find. As I approached the ditch, I could see now that it was indeed a person, a man, sprawled out on the ground, his limbs tangled and limp. Panic set in as I scrambled out of the car, my legs trembling beneath me as I rushed to the man's side. He lay there, unconscious and vulnerable, a silent witness to the horrors of the night. Around me, the darkness seemed to close in, suffocating and oppressive, as if the very air were thick with fear. With trembling hands, I reached out to check for signs of life, my fingers brushing against his cold skin. Relief flooded through me as I felt the faint pulse beneath my fingertips, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. But even as I breathed a sigh of relief, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The man was alive, but barely. His breathing was shallow and labored, his pulse weak and erratic. It was clear that he needed help, and fast. With trembling hands I reached for my phone, my fingers fumbling as I dialed the emergency services. As I waited for help to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at my insides. What had happened to this man? How had he ended up here, alone and abandoned on the side of the highway? The questions swirled in my mind, each one more haunting than the last. Minutes stretched into hours as I waited anxiously for the sound of approaching sirens, my heart racing with fear and anticipation. Finally, the distant wail of sirens pierced the silence, a welcome sound in the darkness. With a sense of relief, I watched as the emergency responders arrived on the scene, their flashing lights cutting through the darkness like beacons of hope. With practiced efficiency, they sprang into action, tending to the injured man with skill and precision. As I watched them work, a wave of gratitude washed over me. In the face of danger and uncertainty, these brave men and women had answered the call, risking their own safety to help those in need. It was a humbling reminder of the power of compassion and human kindness, even in the darkest of times. As the night wore on and the adrenaline began to fade, I found myself grappling with the events of the evening. The close call with the construction vehicle, the chilling encounter with the injured man, it was like something out of a nightmare, a twisted reality that defied explanation. But amid the chaos and uncertainty, one thing remained clear: I had survived. Despite the dangers that lurked in the darkness, I had emerged unscathed, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the resilience of the human heart. As I drove home in the early hours of the morning, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, I couldn't help but feel a sense of profound gratitude. Gratitude for the gift of life, for the kindness of strangers, and for the knowledge that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. And though the events of that night would haunt me for years to come, I knew that I would carry with me the lessons I had learned, the importance of vigilance, the power of compassion, and the unshakable belief that even in the darkest of nights, there is always a glimmer of light. Hey there! I'm new but putting my all into sharing real horror stories. Your support is my motivation. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your comments mean the world to me. Let's make this journey together. The night was shrouded in darkness as I navigated the winding roads of our town, my taxi slicing through the silence like a solitary ship cutting through the vast expanse of a moonless ocean. The dense canopy of trees cast eerie shadows across the road, their twisted branches reaching out like gnarled fingers grasping at the night sky. It was the graveyard shift, a time when the town slept and the darkness reigned supreme. As I drove, my mind wandered, lost in the labyrinth of my thoughts. The night shift was always a mixed bag, filled with moments of quiet reflection interspersed with bursts of adrenaline-fueled chaos. But tonight felt different, the air thick with an unspoken tension, a palpable sense of unease that lingered just beneath the surface. I had just dropped off a customer at the edge of town, the faint glow of their porch light fading into the darkness behind me. As I rounded a bend in the road, my headlights illuminated a scene straight out of a nightmare. There, in the middle of the road, sat a child. My heart lurched in my chest as I slammed on the brakes, the screech of tires tearing through the silence like a primal scream. I flicked on my flashers and stumbled out of the cab, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I approached the child. He couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 years old, his tiny frame bathed in the harsh glow of my headlights. "Hey there, buddy," I said, my voice trembling with disbelief. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The child looked up at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, his bottom lip quivering with fear. He reached out his arms, his tiny fingers grasping desperately at the air. It's cool, bro," I said, my words coming out in a rush of nervous energy. I scooped the child up into my arms, his cries echoing in the stillness of the night. I hurried back to the cab and settled the child into the passenger seat, my mind racing with a million questions. How had he ended up out here all alone? Where were his parents? The weight of the situation bore down on me like a leaden weight, the enormity of the child's vulnerability hitting me like a punch to the gut. I scanned the darkness for any signs of life, my eyes searching for a glimmer of hope amidst the endless expanse of trees. And then, like a beacon in the night, I spotted a faint glow emanating from a nearby driveway. I shifted the car into gear and pulled onto the deserted road, my heart pounding in my chest as I prayed for a miracle. The driveway loomed ahead of me like a lifeline, its gravel path winding through the darkness like a thread of hope in the vast tapestry of the night. As I approached the house, my headlights illuminated a scene straight out of a teen horror movie. A group of teenagers stood in the driveway, their laughter echoing through the night like the cackle of witches gathered around a cauldron. I brought the cab to a stop and stepped out into the cool night air, the child cradled in my arms like a precious cargo. The teenagers paid me no mind, their attention consumed by the revelry unfolding before them. "Hey, is this your kid?" I called out, my voice cutting through the night like a knife. The teenagers turned to me, their faces a mask of confusion. Aiden? Where did you go? One of them asked, his voice tinged with annoyance. I felt a surge of anger rise up within me, the injustice of the situation burning like a fire in my chest. How could they be so cavalier about the safety of this child? Didn't they realize the danger he had been in? But before I could voice my concerns, the teenagers had already turned their attention back to their party, their laughter ringing out through the darkness like a cruel mockery of the night. I stood there for a moment, the weight of the child in my arms a stark reminder of the fragility of life. And then, with a heavy heart, I turned and made my way back to the cab, the child's cries a haunting echo in the stillness of the night. As I drove away from the house, the darkness closed in around me like a suffocating embrace, its tendrils reaching out to ensnare me in its grasp. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered within me, the knowledge that I had come face to face with the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface of our seemingly ordinary town. I wanted to call the police, to report what I had seen and ensure that the child was safe. But fear held me back, its icy grip tightening around my throat with each passing moment. What if the police didn't believe me? What if they thought I was somehow involved? And so, with a heavy heart and a sense of profound guilt weighing me down, I drove on into the night, the memory of that fateful encounter burning like a brand on my soul. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over me like a dark cloud. The image of the child sitting alone in the middle of the road haunted my dreams, his tear-filled eyes a silent plea for help that echoed through the depths of my subconscious. I tried to push the memory aside, to bury it deep within the recesses of my mind where it couldn't hurt me. But no matter how hard I tried, the memory lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of our seemingly ordinary lives. And so, I carried on, my days filled with the monotonous routine of driving the streets of our town, my nights haunted by the specter of that fateful encounter. I never saw the child again, and for that, I was grateful. But the memory of that night would stay with me forever, a reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of our seemingly ordinary world. As I traversed through an unfamiliar expanse of desert and rugged mountains on my way to a remote campground nestled in the heart of Nevada, the sun dipped below the horizon, shrouding the landscape in an inky darkness. Our journey had taken us far from any signs of civilization, the last semblance of human activity fading into the rearview mirror long before twilight descended. The solitude was both eerie and captivating, the vastness of the desert swallowing us whole as we ventured deeper into its embrace. In the fading light, the landscape morphed into a dreamscape of shadows and silhouettes, the jagged peaks of the mountains looming ominously against the twilight sky. The desolation of the desert was palpable, a silent witness to the passage of time, unchanged and unforgiving. As the darkness deepened, a sense of isolation settled over us, the only companions on this desolate stretch of road. Suddenly, the stillness was shattered by the roar of an approaching vehicle, its headlights piercing through the darkness like twin beacons. The vehicle, a rugged pickup truck with a commanding lift kit, barreled past us with reckless abandon, leaving a trail of dust and gravel in its wake. Its speed was startling, a stark contrast to the languid pace at which we had been traveling. As the pickup truck overtook us, I caught a glimpse of its driver, a shadowy figure obscured by the glare of headlights. There was something unsettling about the encounter, a primal instinct warning me of impending danger. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as the pickup truck swerved back into our lane, its proximity unnervingly close. In a sudden, inexplicable maneuver, the pickup truck veered sharply to the left, slamming on its brakes with alarming force. The abruptness of the action sent shockwaves of fear coursing through me, my heart hammering against my chest as I struggled to maintain control of our vehicle. With a swift motion, the pickup truck maneuvered behind us, its blinding headlights illuminating the darkness with an intensity that bordered on aggression. I exchanged a glance with my wife, her expression mirroring my own sense of unease. The situation had escalated far beyond mere coincidence, the actions of the pickup truck driver veering dangerously close to hostility. Panic gripped me as I desperately searched for a way out of the escalating confrontation, my mind racing with a flurry of anxious thoughts. Find me the nearest populated exit, I urged my wife, my voice tinged with urgency as I navigated the treacherous terrain ahead. The road ahead unfurled like a ribbon of uncertainty, its twists and turns a labyrinth of hidden dangers and unseen perils. With each passing mile, the sense of isolation intensified, the darkness closing in around us like a suffocating veil. As we descended down a steep, winding slope, a series of ominous road signs emerged like specters in the night, their warnings a harbinger of impending doom. Watch for wildlife, the first sign proclaimed, its message a chilling reminder of the untamed wilderness that surrounded us. Frequent wildlife crossing next 20 miles. Another sign warned, its ominous implications sending a shiver down my spine. The road signs seemed to taunt us with their dire predictions, each one more ominous than the last. Watch for ice, watch for falling rock, they admonished, their words a grim testament to the unforgiving nature of the terrain. With each passing mile, my anxiety mounted, the weight of impending danger pressing down upon me like a leaden weight. And then, like a cruel twist of fate, a sign appeared that sent a jolt of fear coursing through my veins. Road damage, it declared, its message a chilling reminder of the fragility of our existence. In that moment of panic, I found myself uttering words of disbelief, a futile attempt to rationalize the irrational. Why don't they just fix the damage instead of putting up a sign? I exclaimed, the absurdity of the situation almost too much to bear. As we continued along the desolate stretch of road, the fear that had gripped me refused to relent, its tendrils tightening around my heart with each passing moment. I was acutely aware of the pickup truck trailing behind us, its presence a constant reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond the shadows. And then, like a beacon of hope in the darkness, a town materialized on the horizon, its twinkling lights a welcome sight after hours of relentless darkness. With a sense of relief bordering on disbelief, I navigated towards the nearest exit, my heart pounding in my chest as I prayed for deliverance from the nightmare that had consumed us. As we pulled into the gas station, a wave of relief washed over me, the tension that had gripped me for so long finally dissipating into the cool night air. It was only then, bathed in the harsh fluorescent light of the gas station, that I realized the truth that had eluded me for so long. I had left my brights on. The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning, the absurdity of the situation almost too much to bear. In my panic-induced haze, I had failed to notice the glaring oversight, the simple mistake that had escalated into a full-blown nightmare. With a sense of profound embarrassment, I shut off the headlights, the darkness enveloping us once more in its comforting embrace. As we continued our journey towards the campground, the memory of that harrowing night lingered like a ghost in the darkness, a stark reminder of the fragility of our existence. But amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was also a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a light to guide us home. And so, as we ventured forth into the unknown, I held on to that light with all my might, knowing that no matter how dark the night may seem, there is always a dawn waiting to greet us on the other side. The night air was thick with exhaustion as I made my way home from the graduate lab. It was the kind of fatigue that seeped into your bones, the result of long hours spent conducting experiments in pursuit of knowledge. As I rounded a corner, the darkness seemed to press in around me, the only illumination coming from the dim glow of the streetlights. But just as I began to let my guard down, something unexpected happened. Out of nowhere, a figure dashed into the street directly in front of my car. My heart lurched in my chest as I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the asphalt. The suddenness of it all left me breathless, my mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. The figure stood frozen in the middle of the road, bathed in the eerie glow of the headlights. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, waiting for the person to move, but they remained still, like a statue carved from the darkness itself. Tentatively, I tried to maneuver around them, but before I could even shift into gear, they let out a blood-curdling scream and lunged forward, slamming their hands against the hood of my car. My heart hammered in my chest as I stared wide-eyed at the figure before me. It was then that I realized they were completely naked, their skin covered in grime and filth. The sight sent a shiver down my spine, and I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. For a moment, we were locked in a silent standoff, their wild eyes meeting mine through the windshield. Then, without warning, they began to move again, running in wide circles in front of my car, their movements erratic and disjointed. It was as if they were caught in some twisted dance, a macabre performance in the dead of night. I watched in horror as they continued their strange ritual, their bodies swaying from side to side with each step. It was a surreal sight, one that sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't tear my eyes away, couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me like a suffocating blanket. Minutes stretched into eternity as the figure continued their mad dance, their screams echoing in the stillness of the night. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they lurched to one side, their movements growing slower and more sluggish by the second. With a surge of adrenaline, I seized the opportunity to escape, my foot pressing down hard on the accelerator as I swerved around them, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back, didn't dare to glance in the rearview mirror for fear of what I might see. As I sped away into the darkness, the events of the night replayed in my mind like a twisted nightmare. Who was that person? What had driven them to such madness? I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just witnessed something beyond comprehension, something that defied explanation. Hours later, as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, I finally arrived home, my hands still trembling from the encounter. I stumbled through the front door, grateful to be safe at last, but haunted by the memory of what I had seen. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the back of my mind. I tried to rationalize what had happened, to convince myself that it was just a random encounter with a troubled individual. But deep down, I knew that there was something more to it, something sinister lurking in the shadows. To this day, I still can't explain what happened that night, and I'm not sure I ever will. But one thing is certain, the memory of that encounter will stay with me for the rest of my days, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the edges of our reality. I went on a date with a guy I was set up with by a coworker. He said he needed to stop by his apartment to change as he had been at work. So I went with him, and after we got inside his apartment he tried to kiss and fondle me. I pushed him away, but he wasn't having it, and continued by pushing me into his bedroom and onto his bed. I resisted and tried my best to push him away, but thought to myself I was not going to be strong enough to prevent this guy from raping me. I was crazy scared and felt totally helpless. Just as he ripped the front of my blouse, his roommate came in, and seeing what was happening punched this guy in the face a few times, and yelled at him to get back, which he did luckily. The roommate took my hand and led me out of the apartment, told me this guy had been a problem before and would I like a ride home? I said yes, actually taking another chance, but I was so traumatized all I wanted to do was get away from there. It turned out all right. This guy was really nice and saved me, and I told him how grateful I was. He said he was going to report this guy as it had happened several times while he was his roommate. Well, about 2 weeks later I was invited to a party close to where I lived. I felt like someone was following me there, but brushed it off as just a coincidence. Perhaps the person was even going to the party. A couple hours later I left the party and started driving the 2 miles home and noticed this large car, the one I had seen on the way to the party, following me. Once I took a good look, I realized it was the guy who had tried to rape me earlier. I drove as fast as I could to get away from him, not going home as I didn't want him to know where I lived. I sped onto the freeway and off again and ended up racing around a residential tract trying to lose this guy. Finally, a police car puts on his siren and the guy speeds off. The police pull me over and I'm shaking like a leaf, asking why they didn't pursue the guy chasing me. They said they wanted to make sure I was okay, but I was pretty mad they didn't try to nail this guy. Luckily he didn't know where I lived and I never saw him again, but twice I was so close to being raped or hurt. I had gone out bar hopping with a guy friend, in Victoria. We had gotten a late start that night, and so by the time the bars closed, we'd only had a couple of drinks each. So we weren't drunk, and I was driving my old Dodge Ram Charger. We were headed home to Goliad. There's a little spot about halfway between the two towns where a restaurant and gas station sat, near the entrance to some neighborhoods off the highway. There is a bridge at this spot, which was a 2-lane road back when this incident took place. So we were just cruising along, laughing and talking, when I passed the stores and approached the bridge. I slowed down just a little bit because I saw something standing on the side of the road, just where the bridge began. My friend was looking toward me, talking, when suddenly this thing literally jumped into the road, then jumped back to the side really quickly. It scared me to death, because I just knew I was going to hit it, and I instinctively pressed the gas pedal, but it was all over before I had time to really hit the brakes. What I saw was built like a human, standing upright on 2 legs. It had long hair all over its body. I didn't see clothes on it, just hair which looked to be a blondish red color as my headlights illuminated it. The jump from the side of the road and back was a huge jump. I suppose a human could do that, but maybe not. The funny thing is that I said aloud to my friend, "Wow, did you see that?" And he was sitting there real quiet, and he said, "Yeah, what the hell was that?" And that was it. We never said another word about it, and I never told anyone about it either. It just seemed so surreal, and I realized I would be accused of being drunk or crazy if I told anyone about it. So for years I never thought about the creepy, hairy creature on the side of the road. I'm sad to say that my friend passed away not too long after that night. So I never did discuss what we saw with him. I don't know why neither one of us spoke about it, at the time, or later. I think we were trying to find a way to process such a strange sight, so we quietly mulled things over to ourselves. I'm pretty sure that whatever I saw that night wasn't human. I'm also pretty sure I'll never know what it was. But there is a snapshot of it in my brain, of the way it looked when my headlights first shone on it. Tall, broad-shouldered, 6 long blondish red hair all over its body. The memory will be there for the rest of my life. Hope I don't see that thing ever again. I don't often travel alone at night because I live in a country with a high crime rate. If I do travel at night, it's usually with other people or out of necessity. One of the scariest experiences I had was when I was a student driving a Mini with a friend, a girl, when I was about 18 years old. The problem with this Mini was that for some reason, you couldn't lock it from the inside. It was an old car. You had to get out and use the key to lock it. Despite this, it was a fantastic car with a lot of power. I never had any problems going up a fairly steep hill even in 4th gear. What happened was that we stopped at a traffic light. The town was fairly quiet. Suddenly, there was a man at my car window trying to talk to me. He was a stranger and older than I was. Instinctively, I drove through the red traffic light because I knew he could open that door if he wanted to. With nobody around as it was late, I drove fast, and he got back in his car and followed me. At the next red traffic light, I drove through it, turning left, and then headed straight to a place where I knew there would be people and possibly police. He did not follow me. It might have been completely innocent, but I wasn't about to stick around to find out. I told my parents about the incident. They said nothing. Within a week, they sold that Mini, and my mother gave me her car to drive for a while. It was a car that locked from the inside. It might have seemed like an overreaction by my parents, but then again, my mother had an experience with me as a child that I have no conscious recollection of. She told me we were at the local small shop that sells all kinds of things, waiting in the car park, and there was a strange man watching. She instinctively made sure the back door, where I was sitting and nearest to this man, was locked. In seconds that man grabbed the outside door handle and tried to open it, but he couldn't. Then he ran off. It happened so quickly, my mother said. It was just seconds and he was gone. I was very young, so I have no recollection whatsoever. I heard about it, though, when this later incident happened to me. The men involved were of different races, so it was definitely not the same person. I think what you can take from these experiences is that you cannot be too careful, especially with girls. As I cruised along Route 40 in Arizona, headed west toward Nevada, I decided to make a pit stop at a gas station around 8 p.m. While refueling, I noticed a couple of striking women pumping gas on the other side of the pump. Across from them stood a man in his late 40s, completely engrossed in watching them, seemingly oblivious to everything else around him. After grabbing some snacks inside the station, I emerged to find both the young woman's car and the older man's truck gone. Deciding to take a short break, I lingered at the gas station for an hour, catching a bit of sleep before hitting the road again. Several hours later, after some heavy speeding, I pulled over at another gas station. There, I spotted the same young women filling up their car and enjoying a meal at a nearby picnic table. They seemed to have been there for a while. I didn't see any sign of the man in the truck, but I admit, I wasn't particularly vigilant. However, what happened next sent shivers down my spine. Admiring the women as they left, my gaze wandered to the adjacent parking lot where headlights suddenly illuminated the figure of the same man from before. He left shortly after the women departed once again. It could have been dismissed as a coincidence, given the limited options for stopping along the highway. But things took a turn for the eerie. As I resumed my journey, I noticed the man's truck tailing the women's car, its high beams glaring menacingly. Sensing trouble, I decided to maintain a safe distance behind the truck. After about 10 minutes, the women pulled over, presumably to shake off their pursuer. With a sigh of relief, I watched as the truck continued on its way, and I followed suit. However, my relief was short-lived. Less than a mile down the road, the truck abruptly veered off to the side of the highway. Suspicious, I pulled over a safe distance ahead. Moments later, the women drove past, and to my horror, the truck was back on their tail. With too many unsettling coincidences piling up, I knew I had to act. Dialing the emergency number, I alerted the authorities about the unfolding situation. About 15 agonizing minutes later, I spotted flashing lights in my rearview mirror as the police pulled over the menacing truck. Was it a case of overactive imagination fueled by too many horror stories, or a genuine threat lurking in the darkness of the night? I couldn't be sure. But one thing was certain, I wasn't taking any chances. In the end, it was better to be safe than sorry. As I resumed my journey, the adrenaline slowly subsided, replaced by a lingering sense of unease. The memory of that eerie encounter would stay with me long after I reached my destination. Perhaps it was just another bizarre incident on the midnight highways, a tale to be shared with friends over a campfire. Or maybe, just maybe, it was a brush with something far more sinister, a reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows when the world is cloaked in darkness. The night was dark, the highway empty except for the occasional passing car. In the eerie stillness, a sound shattered the tranquility, a loud crash followed by the sickening screech of metal against asphalt. It was the sound of a jeep careening off the road and flipping into the ditch, its wheels still spinning in a frenzy of motion. Amidst the chaos of twisted metal and shattered glass, one man found himself thrust into a nightmare he could never have imagined. He had been driving home, lost in his thoughts, when the commotion ahead snapped him back to reality. Pulling over, he grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. As he stumbled out of his car and approached the scene, the gravity of the situation hit him like a ton of bricks. The Jeep lay on its roof, a mangled wreck, and the air was thick with the smell of gasoline and burning rubber. Without hesitation, he scrambled down into the ditch, his mind racing with thoughts of how he could help. What he found there would haunt him for the rest of his days. The driver, barely recognizable amidst the wreckage, lay crumpled on the ground, his body broken and battered beyond recognition. He had been thrown from the vehicle, his life slipping away with each labored breath. In that moment, time seemed to stand still as the man knelt beside his cousin, his hands trembling as he tried to stem the flow of blood. But it was no use, the injuries were too severe, the damage too extensive. All he could do was hold him close and whisper words of comfort as the life drained from his body. As the sirens wailed in the distance, signaling the arrival of help, the man felt a sense of numbness wash over him. How could this have happened? How could someone he loved be taken from him in such a senseless way? The answers eluded him, lost in a fog of shock and disbelief. The hours that followed were a blur of flashing lights and whispered conversations, as emergency responders worked tirelessly to clear the wreckage and tend to the injured. But for the man kneeling in the ditch, none of it seemed to matter. All he could think about was the life that had been lost, the future that had been stolen away in an instant. It wasn't until the next day that the full weight of the tragedy hit him. As he sat in his living room, surrounded by grieving family members, he listened in stunned silence as the details of the accident were revealed. And then, like a punch to the gut, came the realization that would haunt him for the rest of his days. The driver of the Jeep had been his cousin, the same cousin he had held in his arms as he took his final breath. It was a revelation that shook him to his core, filling him with a sense of guilt and despair that threatened to consume him. How could he not have recognized him? How could he have failed to save him? The questions swirled around his mind, taunting him with their unanswerable complexity. In the days and weeks that followed, the man found himself grappling with emotions he had never known before: grief, guilt, anger, and profound sadness. Everywhere he looked, he saw reminders of the life that had been lost, the dreams that would never be realized. But amidst the darkness, there was also a glimmer of hope, a flicker of light that refused to be extinguished. For in the midst of tragedy, the man had found something precious, a newfound appreciation for the fragility of life, and the importance of cherishing every moment we have with those we love. And so, as he stood by the roadside, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast its golden glow across the landscape, the man made a silent vow to live each day to the fullest, to hold his loved ones close, and to never forget the precious gift of life that had been so cruelly taken away. In the late 1990s, during a journey from Santiago to San Rafael, in Argentina, my family faced a peculiar choice: take the modern highway or the old winding road known as Sierra Oscura. Sierra Oscura, meaning dark mountains, earned its name from its countless twists and turns, often causing motion sickness among travelers. However, my grandfather had a fondness for the scenic views and the nostalgia of driving on this historic route, despite its dwindling popularity due to the newer highway. One evening, as we made our way back to our grandparents' house in San Rafael, my grandfather took the wheel, opting for Sierra Oscura. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the mountains, and soon, darkness enveloped the landscape. With minimal traffic on the desolate road, the journey promised solitude, interrupted only by occasional passing through small towns. Approximately 45 minutes into the drive, darkness had fully descended, and my grandfather began to slow down. Sitting in the back seat, I leaned forward, curious about the sudden change in speed. Peering over the front seats, I spotted a massive tree trunk blocking the road ahead. My grandfather brought the car to a halt, his instincts kicking in. Without hesitation, he shifted into reverse, maneuvering the car to turn around and escape the obstruction. As we reversed, I strained to catch a glimpse of our surroundings. Dimly illuminated by the fading taillights, I spotted figures emerging from the shadows of the adjacent trees, wielding flashlights and firearms. We were on the verge of a potential robbery, a realization that sent a shiver down my spine. Thanks to my grandfather's swift reaction, we narrowly avoided a dangerous encounter. As we sped away from the scene, leaving the would-be assailants behind, relief washed over me. However, the unsettling experience left an indelible mark, ensuring that Sierra Oscura would be a road we never ventured upon again. The rest of the journey passed in tense silence, the memory of our narrow escape lingering in the air. Arriving safely at our grandparents' house, we recounted the harrowing ordeal, grateful for our safety. Yet the specter of that night loomed large in our minds, a reminder of the perils that lurk in the darkness of the night. In the years that followed, whenever the topic of our ill-fated journey arose, it served as a cautionary tale. Sierra Oscura became synonymous with danger and uncertainty, a road best left untraveled. Despite its scenic beauty and nostalgic charm, its reputation as a haven for criminal activity overshadowed any allure it once held. As time passed, the memory of that night began to fade, replaced by the comforting familiarity of safer routes. Yet the lessons learned from our encounter on Sierra Oscura remained etched in our minds, a reminder to always remain vigilant and trust our instincts, especially when navigating the treacherous roads of the night. The night was bitterly cold, and I found myself driving through a massive blizzard on McDonald Pass in Montana. I had been following a gray Toyota Tundra for some time, and despite the worsening weather conditions, the driver seemed determined to maintain a brisk pace. I kept close behind, my own caution urging me to slow down, but the Tundra pressed on ahead, seemingly unfazed by the mounting snow and ice. As we ascended the pass, I noticed the Tundra beginning to pull away from me. Knowing the steep inclines and sharp turns that awaited us, I decided to ease off the gas and slow down to about 35 miles per hour. It was a decision born out of experience and respect for the mountain, a decision that may have ultimately saved my life. Just 5 minutes later, I passed the fresh tire marks in the snow, marking the spot where the Tundra had veered off the road and plunged down the mountainside. My heart sank as I realized the gravity of the situation, and I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands trembling as I reached for my phone to dial 911. From my vantage point above, I could see the wreckage of the Tundra, now upside down and engulfed in flames, about 300 yards down the mountainside. It was a harrowing sight, one that filled me with a sense of dread and helplessness as I waited for help to arrive. When the first responders finally reached the scene, I watched anxiously as they worked to free the trapped driver from the mangled wreckage. It was a tense and agonizing wait, each passing moment feeling like an eternity as I prayed for the driver's safety. In the days that followed, the memory of that night haunted me, a constant reminder of the dangers of driving too fast in hazardous conditions. It was a lesson learned the hard way, a lesson that would stay with me for the rest of my days. As I drove past the spot where the Tundra had gone off the road, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for my own safety. It was a sobering reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of respecting the power of nature. And so, as I continued on my journey, I made a silent vow to always drive with caution and to never underestimate the dangers of the road, especially in the face of a raging blizzard on a treacherous mountain pass. For in the end, it was a decision that could mean the difference between life and death. As a child, I often found myself fascinated by the mysteries of the night. The darkness held a certain allure, a canvas upon which imagination could paint its most vivid dreams and darkest fears. But one particular night stands out among the rest, etched into my memory like a scene from a horror movie. It was a warm summer evening when my dad decided to take us for a drive through the countryside. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the fields of corn that stretched out endlessly before us. I sat in the back seat, gazing out the window as the world blurred past in a haze of green and gold. Suddenly, something caught my eye. 2 red pinpricks of light, glowing like embers amidst the sea of corn. I blinked, thinking it was just a trick of the light, but when I looked again, they were still there, following us with an otherworldly intensity. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Do you see that?" He glanced in the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "See what, kiddo?" "Those lights," I replied, pointing frantically out the window. "In the cornfield. They're following us." For a moment, there was silence as my dad processed my words. Then, to my surprise, he chuckled softly. "Ah, those," he said, his voice calm and casual in a way that sent shivers down my spine. "Those are cornfield demons. Nothing to worry about. Just stay in the car, and you'll be okay." Cornfield demons. The words echoed in my mind, conjuring up images of sinister creatures lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce on unsuspecting victims. I wanted to believe that my dad was just joking, that there was a rational explanation for the strange lights in the cornfield, but something about his tone told me otherwise. As we drove on, the lights continued to follow us, their presence a constant source of unease. I couldn't tear my eyes away from them, each passing moment only serving to deepen the sense of dread that coiled in the pit of my stomach. Eventually, we came to a stop by the side of the road, the car jolting to a halt as my dad muttered something about a flat tire. My heart pounded in my chest as he stepped out into the darkness, leaving me alone in the car with nothing but my fear for company. I watched him through the window, my breath catching in my throat as he disappeared into the cornfield, swallowed up by the shadows. Minutes stretched into eternity as I waited, every second feeling like an eternity until finally, he reappeared, unharmed and seemingly unfazed by the ordeal. "Fixed it," he said casually as he climbed back into the car, as if nothing out of the ordinary had just happened. But I could see the glint of something in his eyes, a hint of amusement mixed with something darker, something that sent a chill down my spine. As we drove home, the lights in the cornfield faded into the distance, but the memory of that night lingered in the back of my mind like a half-forgotten nightmare. Years passed, and yet I could never shake the feeling that there was something out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. To this day, I still don't know what those 2 red pinpricks were, whether they were simply a trick of the light or something more sinister. But one thing is for certain, I'll never forget the night I came face to face with the cornfield demons, and the lesson they taught me about the true nature of fear. It was a moonless night, the kind that blankets the desert with an inky darkness, swallowing everything in its path. I was driving east just outside Flagstaff, Arizona, the hum of my engine and the rush of the wind the only companions on the lonely stretch of highway. The clock on my dashboard blinked 12:03 a.m., a stark reminder of the late hour. The road ahead was a ribbon of asphalt, disappearing into the horizon as I pushed the accelerator, the speedometer needle inching closer to 80 miles per hour. The occasional flicker of streetlights cast fleeting shadows across the landscape, illuminating the gnarled branches of mesquite trees that lined the roadside. As I navigated a gentle bend in the road, a peculiar sight caught my attention. Through the gaps in the trees, I could see the faint glimmer of headlights, dancing like fireflies in the distance. For a moment, I chuckled to myself, amused by the illusion that the lights were coming towards me. But as I drew closer, my amusement turned to dread. The headlights were indeed approaching, growing brighter and more menacing with each passing second. My heart thundered in my chest as I realized the truth. I was on a collision course with a wrong-way driver. In a panic, I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the pavement as I veered sharply to the right. Adrenaline surged through my veins, heightening my senses as I narrowly avoided the oncoming vehicle, its metallic frame hurtling past me in a blur of motion. With trembling hands, I brought my car to a shuddering halt on the shoulder of the road, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I struggled to comprehend what had just happened. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burned rubber, mingling with the sharp tang of fear that hung heavy in the night. Shaking fingers fumbled for my phone as I dialed 911, my voice trembling as I recounted the terrifying encounter to the dispatcher on the other end of the line. Minutes stretched into eternity as I waited for help to arrive, the silence broken only by the distant wail of sirens growing steadily louder. When the police finally arrived, I stumbled out of my car, my legs weak and unsteady beneath me. The officers listened intently as I recounted the events of the night, their expressions grave as they surveyed the scene before them. It was only then that the full magnitude of what had transpired hit me. I had come within inches of death, a mere heartbeat away from a fate too terrible to contemplate. The reality of it all washed over me in a wave of disbelief and horror, leaving me shaken to the core. As the officers took my statement and began their investigation, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. Who was the wrong-way driver, and what had compelled them to risk their own life and the lives of others with such reckless abandon? The questions swirled in my mind, taunting me with their elusive answers. But amidst the uncertainty, one thing remained abundantly clear. Tonight, I had stared into the abyss and emerged shaken but alive, a survivor of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of the road. In the days that followed, the incident haunted my thoughts like a specter, refusing to release its grip on my consciousness. The image of those headlights bearing down on me lingered in my mind, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the randomness of fate. But amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was also gratitude, a profound sense of appreciation for the precious gift of existence, bestowed upon me by the narrowest of margins. I vowed to never take another moment for granted, to cherish each breath as if it were my last. As time passed, the memory of that fateful night began to fade, gradually receding into the recesses of my mind like a half-remembered dream. But the lessons I had learned remained etched in my heart, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. And so, as I drove once more through the desert night, the headlights of passing cars casting long shadows across the barren landscape, I knew that I carried with me the indelible mark of that encounter, a reminder of the night I came face to face with the darkness and emerged stronger for having survived it. Hey there! I'm new but putting my all into sharing real horror stories. Your support is my motivation. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your comments mean the world to me. Let's make this journey together.